Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's coffee break. This week we are talking about SCOM Asset tagging. My name is Matthew Long, and I'm joined here by Ashley Thompson.
Hi, guys.
So it's been a while, Ash, since you were on the last one. I think you did custom labeling was your last coffee break, wasn't it?
A few months back, yep.
So for those of you who haven't seen that coffee break before, Ash is a member of our STS sort of internal systems team. So he keeps all the stuff running at Squared Up that we need to do business. So he's quite well placed to talk about this topic today. And I think we'll dive straight into this stuff now because it's been a little while coming and there's a lot to get through. Okay, so today, what we're talking about, because asset tagging is quite a loose term, what we're talking about specifically is extending the SCOM CMDB with asset information that's useful for a monitoring or visualization purpose. So specifically, we're talking about things that you might use then to do like group pop or to create custom perspectives with. We're not necessarily just talking about like putting things into the CMDB for the sake of showing them on a dashboard. We've shown before how you can leverage things like ServiceNow or Service Manager to go and talk to your CMDB and pull along business information. So if you want to pull through a whole bunch of business attributes that aren't necessarily relevant to how SCOM would be configured or how dashboards should be displayed specifically for different kinds of users, that sort of thing generally should live in those stores still, not pollute SCOM CMDB. Keep your database sort of clean and light if you can, but stuff where you'd want to say, if it's in this environment, it should get these overrides, or if it belongs to this team, it should have this particular perspective displayed. That's the kind of thing we're looking at bringing into SCOM here and leveraging today. Okay, so we'll take a look at doing that via the registry, so one example scenario of doing it, and then the kind of cool things you can do once you've scaled it this way. So really what we're talking about is looking at the concept that management of IT infrastructure and components is rarely just purely based on the technicality of that software or those components. Like, yes, shared infrastructure is often managed by an individual team, like the Active Directory team or the SQL team. But very quickly, once you get outside of those pieces, the sort of application owners or the function of the thing or the actual teams assigned to manage it becomes a lot more relevant than just the fact that it's an IIS web server. So if you think about like a lot of your application servers, your web servers, they will have different monitoring configuration depending on who's running them, depending on the classification of the app, and its SLA, things like that. So often taking that business information, which you won't find stored in the OS anywhere typically, like SCOM doesn't already know that stuff about these servers, but taking that information and enhancing the SCOM CMDB lets you start modifying how SCOM interacts with those objects based on that sort of stuff. So I think, Ash, one of the ones you suggested was the patching tier as well, wasn't it? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've internally got core systems which cannot be patched at sort of during business hours.
Right.
Especially SCOM, for example. All of our engineers test against SCOM. So if SCOM's being slow, SCOM's offline, they can't do anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So just having a patching tier there, you can actually look at it very quickly, gauge from a dashboard, okay, well, this server actually can't be patched right now, and you can actually move on to other objects.
Presumably as well, that also covers things like these are sort of bronze, like low tier servers. We don't test updates thoroughly. We just whack them on and off we go and we restore if there's a problem.
Exactly. I mean, you don't necessarily need to touch every single aspect of a security update. For example, most servers just get that straight away.
Right.
Whereas we do have some that require severe testing just in case they mess with like the firewall rules or anything like that.
Right. Okay, cool. So hopefully this is something that some of you have actually done before. So as a way of sort of a virtual poll, let us know in the chat or if you're watching this on YouTube via the YouTube comments, if you've actually done this already, if you've already extended SCOM with sort of additional information and extra fields, because this is something that we see that's quite typical in custom environments. So it'd be interesting to see how this gets done and kind of the mechanism that you guys are using to do this. So we're going to show you a sample today, but I'd be keen to figure out how you guys are doing this as well, and if you already have or if you're interested in doing it but never quite got around to it. So do let us know and get in touch. Okay, so the example today you're going to walk us through, Ash, is what we've done here internally in Squared Up, which is to create an MP to do this, right? So what have you done for us?
So quite simply, the MP consists of three areas. There is 3 tasks which allow you to set the registry keys which extend the Windows computer class with new properties.
Right.
There's also the discovery. So this actually looks at these computer objects and pulls back those keys and populates them onto the object in SCOM. And then also there's some dynamic grouping available. Right. So the dynamic grouping just uses dynamic regular expression to basically look at certain properties, so team, owner, etc., to determine which groups they should go into. This is particularly beneficial for us for things like overrides. Our IIS monitoring, for example, is horrific. We are constantly tearing IIS servers up and down, destroying app pools, etc. And SCOM is filled with alerts like IIS application pool stopped, etc. All of the websites being killed. It's all just a bit of a mess. So what we want to do is we want to, at deployment, say, this server is a test server for Squared Up. we should not be monitoring IIS on this server because of the fact that there's so much noise.
Right, okay, excellent. So the sort of key point here is that we're going to use quite a simple mechanism for tagging these things, which is the registry. That's
Absolutely.
our discovery source. So rather than using like a CMDB-like service now, we're just going to lay something down on the machine. And that could be, like you say, by deployment.
Yep.
So the build script goes and puts those keys in, or part of our build automation that goes and deploys our servers, like it's a task sequence in that SCCM or whatever, that process lays them down. And then you created some tasks in the MP here so that if these machines already exist, or like if you need to update it via lifecycle, so the machine goes from one environment to another, or moves on from being production to being decommissioned. There's tasks in the management pack to go and clean those up as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And also these populate dynamically, so whenever you actually make a change, they just get pulled in straight away, so the properties are updated almost immediately.
Right, so no more chasing down like servers and not being told by your admins they've made a change to this server, so it's got the wrong monitoring config or the wrong groups, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. So the key point there that Ash is talking about is that we can then, once you've got these groups created that dynamically populate based on location, region, environment, purpose, whatever, we can then apply different monitors to those. So we can say these servers in this environment, as Ash was saying, turn off IIS monitoring because the devs are constantly pushing new stuff to that. It'll always be going red. Or we can create notifications for these servers. So these are production good servers. If we get a critical alert on those, we want to know about it. And of course, we're a dashboard company, so we can create dashboards. So we can either in the SCOM console scope views based on this groups, or in Squared Up we can go and create dashboards and say this tile shows everything in this group and it updates automatically if a new server gets built and added in there because those keys have been set and those class properties are visible inside SCOM.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So that's sort of the theory. Let's go and take a look at the actual sort of results of this. So we've got the MP imported into our environment. Ash has very kindly agreed, because he actually built this MP, to release this onto our GitHub after the coffee break. So they'll be there as a sample. It's not something we're going to officially support, so there's no guarantees that it'll work in your environment per se. But if you want to look at that and take it as a basis, rename the IDs and import it into your environment, you can do so. And obviously, if you're in trouble, I'm sure you can go onto Community Answers and get some help there from some fellow community members about trying to get this thing working in your environment. So not necessarily fit for purpose for you, but good as a sample. Okay, so let's go and have a look at this in action. So I'm going to jump to my server. So here is a object inside SCOM.
Yep.
This is your box actually here, isn't it? AT01.
Yep.
Let me just refresh the page because I bet you I've been locked out.
Nope, you're good.
There you go. So if I scroll down here, you can see that this is the monitored entity tab. Here's all the properties that would typically normally be in SCOM. And because we've added a class, extended the Windows Computer class with some extra properties, you can now see it also has the application that's installed. We've got the build platform, the environment it's in, the location, which could be either sort of a logical one, like it's in Azure or on-premise, or it could also be physical, like it's in this particular office. And also we've got the purpose of the server as well, like what is actually being used for. So as an immediate thing, now I can actually look at this server. I get a random alert for it. Okay, who owns it and what's going on it? That's kind of helpful, right? But we can also start populating groups based on this. I'll show you those in a moment. Now, your tasks, right? I've just spotted that there's a typo on your application.
That engineer must have been in a bit of a hurry. So
Right.
yeah, there's a slight spelling mistake there. And he's also missed the environment. So we just don't know if this is staging, test, production.
So potentially this server's just been finished, built, and it hasn't been assigned to production yet.
Exactly.
And then once we assign this to production, a whole bunch of monitoring gets spun up by group populator and overrides.
That's it. But if these aren't populated correctly, so for example, squared up not being spelled correctly, we've also employed no spaces in our keys here so that we can, keep a little bit of conformity throughout this.
Right.
That's not actually going to go into those groups. So we need to fix that before we do anything else.
Cool. So because there's Ash has enabled modifying the registry keys via a SCOM task, which is pretty easy to do, you're doing it via PowerShell, I believe, aren't you?
Yeah, that's correct.
So we actually have a task for that we created. And if I go up to task up here, I can say select a task, set registry keys, and I can, via overrides, set the values I want to set. So I want to make this a application should be squared up. And we also want to set the environment to, this is a staging server. Your box
That's
is
correct, yep.
Staging. There we go. So I finished my build on this box. It's now ready to go. I hit execute. There we go. And the task now complete successfully. That's not a particularly interesting output, but what that's actually saying is this task doesn't just modify those registry keys, it also then utilizes a little feature in SCOM to do dynamic discovery. So if you ever watched the masterclass I did on data on demand way back about a year ago, you'll see I had a thing there where I could re-trigger discoveries instantaneously. So if I close this panel down and hit refresh, That's task updated the registry keys. And then what it did was it triggered SCOM to say rerun the discovery that populates these key attributes. So if I refresh the page, just because I'm impatient, there we go. It's updated real time. So now we can actually tag it and see that applied, which now means as well that that will now be in the right groups, the right monitoring will be enabled. So it's much, much faster than waiting like a day for the tag to appear.
Exactly. I mean, the default on registry discovery, I believe, is actually 24 hours. So you'd have to wait 24 hours for that to appear, or flush the health cache on the agent, which just isn't ideal because you lose out on monitoring for a couple of minutes.
Yep. And if it's in production right now, you can't really do that.
No.
So that's good for one server, right? But I just want to point out you can do that in bulk as well. So if I go to the SCOM console, I can multi-select computers here and then run the task, and it would apply those same values to all of them. So this is a really easy way, right, of if I haven't potentially laid these keys down before, this is a new thing we're bringing into our environment. We've got 100 servers, but I know that I can quickly bulk select a load of them based on like the naming convention or whatever, or run a PowerShell script to go and put the key there. I've got lots of different options for how I could apply this sort of en masse the first time around if I need to.
Exactly. I mean, once this MP was imported into our environment, and you can see we've got 60 odd objects there, applying the actual keys took about 20 minutes, which is pretty amazing considering what this is actually doing afterwards as well.
Right. So the next thing is then to configure those groups, right?
Indeed.
So I go to authoring and then I go to the groups tab. We can see here if I put in, you've got Azure is one of them, isn't it? Azure Test Service. There we go.
That's the one.
So if I go to the property of this group, this is just a standard group that you've created using the SCOM console. If I go to dynamic members for this group, you can see you've added a regex here, right?
Yep. So real simple regular expression. We've basically said, look at the extended class that we've chosen, which is the squared up extended class. Then what we've said is we basically want these two properties, so location and team, and to match the regular expression, we've gone with case and sensitive, and we've basically said we need them to be Azure and test, specifically and as well. Something that's very confused every now and again is actually or and how that should be applied. But in this situation, we do want and. We want only the ones that are test and Azure. Right.
So you could use this very easy to create like all London web servers or all production, gold tier servers or
that's it. And you're not limited on how many of those properties you can apply, as far as I'm aware. So you can actually say, okay, well, we want a very specific group that actually looks at all of those keys, and you may need to have like a specific OS version that you need to map to as well. So it's very useful.
Cool. And then, as I said, once that group is done, we can do once that group is created, we can do lots of cool things with it. So let me flip back to slides for a second and show you the kind of things, or talk specifically through the kind of things you can do once you've enabled these kind of groups. But as I said, hopefully you can see immediately how even just without doing that, this adds some real value into your sort of SCOM environment. Now, so back to the slides. So the key point I made at the beginning was that we're doing this primarily to drive monitoring or visualization workflows in SCOM. We don't necessarily want to import and fill SCOM with all the possible business information we have about a server if it's not relevant for the monitoring or a presentation configuration. Those things are better left in their existing CMDB. Have one source of truth if you can. Try not to have it in multiple places. And then bring those in using the SQL tile or the Web API tile or the HTML tile. You've got various different options for pulling in additional data into Squared Up. But you can't use those to drive perspective and dashboard configuration. However, once you've got a group that does that, so by importing those key pieces of information that you need into SCOM, what we can then do, for example, is create dashboards that contain content only relevant to a particular application or a particular team or a particular SLA. So you can do things like saying, okay, these dashboards automatically show all of the production servers, or these dashboards automatically show, all of the staging web servers, or whatever you might need to do, or for a particular team that manages it. It makes scoping tiles very, very easy. And again, rather than going list view and listing them manually, and then someone adds a new server in, the dashboard's out of date, it's not showing there, it goes red, no one gets told, that sort of problem. Now it updates automatically. That's very, very, very useful to you. It'll save you a lot of time.
There's also plenty of examples out there where generally customers have taken something from an API and then used that using some kind of automation to actually map that into the properties within SCOM, correct?
Yep.
So essentially you can go from having your one source of truth that then maps those properties automatically into your SCOM objects, which then populate the groups. So it's nice and simple. You can make this as easy as you want it to be.
Yep, or as ridiculously complicated as you want it to be. I think we have one customer, don't we, who's using, let me get this right, they've got the information in service now, that's being exported into Config Manager via Orchestrator.
Yep.
Config Manager is then every 24 hours applying those to a registry key. Those registry keys are then discovered using a discovery in SCOM that maps that out.
Yep.
And then they're driving all of their sort of application monitoring based off of that. So they have Groups get spun up automatically based on workflows there. Template dashboards get spun up automatically. Like it's a huge,
it's massive,
piece.
yeah.
But it means they're like hundreds of applications can now all be very easily sort of managed.
And they, other than having to set those keys initially or those properties in ServiceNow, they don't have to do anything. The rest of that is all automated.
Yeah. So when the business onboards a new application, it all gets spun up automatically. Very, very cool. So I just had a question come in from chat I wanted to raise in case we weren't particularly clear. Under the hood, all we're doing here is we are just extending the SCOM class with a registry discovery, right? That's like ultimately all
exactly. I mean, all this is saying is basically on the Windows computer class, we've created an extended property, which is these sort of team owner, etc. And then we've just said, what is that value? And that's just displayed on all of the any perspective related to Windows computer.
Yeah. So that's very, very easy to pull in. And you could apply that to anything. It doesn't have to be just computer leveled. Although it's often typically helpful to do it at that point.
Yeah.
You don't, if you're like, doing it to SQL servers, you don't want to tag that to all the databases, for example, because typically all the DBs on the server probably belong to the same sort of group, tier, whatever. So try and do it at a higher level if you want to. And because of the way in SCOM you have access to properties from the hosting parents anyway, from a database, you can already say, we'll get my hosting parents.
Transcends, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Go and get my hosting parents team owner, and that's the person who actually owns this piece of content. So that's dashboards. Perspectives get even cooler because now we can start doing assigning visibility on perspectives based on group membership. So when you go to like a computer, if you ever dug into any of our perspectives, you'll notice like the SQL perspective, how it works is it says when you go to a computer or a component that's a member of this group or is a member of this class, show this particular perspective. That's how it actually functions under the hood.
Yeah.
So now we can say, well, okay, show this perspective only for a specific app or only for a specific team, or maybe show a different version of a perspective. So if one team says, look, we like our SQL metrics shown this way, and a different group wants it done another way, what you can do as an admin of Squared Up is create two perspectives, one that matches Team A's servers, one that matches Team B's servers via that group. And then as far as they're concerned, they just see a SQL perspective because they never see both of them at the same time. But actually now they get a custom experience both. And it's not because there's one perspective that changes its content. It's because there's two and they only actually see one based on that sort of matching algorithm. Or you can do it based on sort of functional tier. So sometimes it's helpful to do it, across not just the fact that it's SQL, but like all database technologies or all web technologies. You might have a series of standards that you say, look, regardless of whether it's IIS or Apache or whatever, these are the things that we look for on our web servers. So we want to actually group those all together based on that, rather than just doing a discovery for a particular class. Or potentially your application is something homegrown internally and there isn't a management pack for it.
Sure.
Right? So this is an easy way of you getting that kind of feel. And rather you saying, well, let's target, overrides based on when app XYZ is installed. Well, there isn't a management pack for that, but we can just group them via these registry keys, and then we'll know to apply overrides correctly based on that watermark always being there for those particular servers.
Just takes the pain away more than anything.
Yep. And then the last one is I sort of threw up there is location-based as an idea. So potentially you're going to have lots of branch offices or maybe different regions, and you want to show different perspectives based upon its local region. So maybe show a network diagram that's relevant. Got Visio that shows the local networking stack. That's relevant in this particular office, so you can have that there. And all the servers that are in that location, then when you click on that, you've got a perspective that shows that. And again, you can call it local network. And then if you have 5 or 6 different local networks that are only ever applicable to one particular server or one group of servers, it'll look like the perspective is dynamically changing, even when actually it's not. It's just that it's a different one, the appropriate one, being shown each time. So some examples, let's go and dive onto our Squared Up server now and show you those. So we've got infrastructure CDs. So this is one you configuration, isn't it, Ash?
Yeah, so this is just the top level dashboard, essentially. This is all of the objects that have these keys applied to them and what they are. And all we're using here is just a very simple custom label with a couple of spans to just break it up and some bolding just to make it a little bit more visible. And you can see pretty much everything you need to here. So we actually have a fairly straightforward naming convention. I have seen naming conventions where you have to look it up on a spreadsheet just to understand what's going on. However, from that, as long as you've applied these keys, you can look at this one dashboard and see everything that you need to. But this transcends as well. You can go onto a perspective and have it targeted dynamically. So you only actually have to create it once on a Windows computer object, and it will display the correct property for that object depending on sort of contextually what you're looking at. And so this is going back to custom labels that we discussed previously.
Yeah, so this is basically a custom label. This is just status. This is just a status tile, isn't it? Where
exactly, yeah.
Customize that. So let me just go under the hood here. So there's the label, lovely HTML embedded in there. Like I said, we actually walked through this in a previous coffee break, so go and check that out if you want to sort of see more detail on how that actually works. There's another example, maybe a bit easier to configure, is this status block tile one here. So I'm
Showing off
using
the new tech.
So I'm using the label and sublabel properties here on the status block tile to display in the top label the name of the server, and then the sublabel is showing the team that manages it, and then the purpose of that server as well, so that it's a bit more obvious what it actually does. If it's named well, obviously you'll know, but sometimes it isn't immediately obvious necessarily for a SQL server. Okay, what's it actually serving? Oh, this one's serving SCOM, that kind of thing. I mean, you could. That's just showing off the the health state summary as well. So we could remove that and just have the whatever property we like. And because I can actually control the height here, where's it gone? Blocks. I could realistically make that as tall as I like and add extra stuff in.
Have as many of those properties, contact, email address, anything that you want, essentially.
These are ultimately both hacks for the fact that currently we don't make it easy or possible for you to modify dynamic table. Our engineering team have said that actually in an upcoming release, not the next one, but in one of our upcoming releases soon, we are going to have the ability to modify dynamic tables, and when we get that, we'll be able to then easily have columns and say, grab this property and show it on a table.
Exactly. I mean, it's a very requested thing to be able to actually configure the dynamic tables, but under the hood, it's actually very complex to get that correct, and to then expose that via something as simple as the dashboard designer is another step again. So that's something we're working on.
So that's dashboards. So perspective-wise, I've created a perspective here. You go, called it's the testing perspective. So this is one that we use on Untitled, and our testing team use internally. It's quite specific. So it shows off the overall state of the box, shows the versions of software installed, because again, we're constantly having to go, this is bugged now. Okay, what's actually on there? The parent groups it's part of, and specific monitors on specific objects the test team care about. But if I go to the configuration of this perspective, this applies to all servers or anything that's in the squared up Azure test servers group. So if a machine is tagged with test as its purpose,
team on that one.
Sorry. It will automatically show up there for that team. Everyone else doesn't see this perspective, so this perspective ribbon isn't getting clogged up with all these extra perspectives, because I don't know if actually I can give a good example of that, but some of our servers are starting to get pretty busy with all the stuff that's on them.
Especially given how many teams are in this particular environment messing around and creating stuff.
Exactly. Like if this bar becomes like 2 lines, it becomes actually quite tricky to immediately find what you want. So sometimes being able to limit the perspectives that show up there based on if it's actually relevant or not is kind of useful. So that's what this is doing here. So really the imagination is your limit here. Like I said, you can apply them based on role, based on the location, based on any other attributes that you need. But the recommendation would definitely be to only import properties that makes sense in a monitoring context. Like, it's different when it's like, okay, let's import the contact details of the person we should call in an outage. That is useful for monitoring purposes. But generally speaking, other properties that are useful but not actually ever going to change how the box is monitored or managed, probably, like Ash said, should be left in the CMDB, or maybe we only import those for certain objects because we don't necessarily want to bulk out our SCOM classes with thousands of extra properties. It does ultimately go in the SCOM database. Everything that goes in there does obviously slow it down a bit. So,
not to mention the discoveries on top of that affects the agent. So you don't want to bulk and have too many.
I think if you're trying to add more than like 10 properties, you've probably gone too far.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So try and focus on the ones that really make sense for your business, and you can always extend them and add more in the future. So do keep that in mind. Okay, so I know we've gone a little bit long today, so let's wrap this sort of thing up. But as I said, if this is something that interests you and you've seen this before, or perhaps you want to see a more specific example, or there's a particular CMDB that you've configured this with and you want to show off your cool integration, do get in touch and let us know, because we love showcasing sort of customer environments and the cool things that customers have done. So do keep us in mind next time you're working on something like this and go, this is pretty awesome. Let us know about your awesome stuff and we'll share it with the rest of the community. Okay, so let us know what you'd like us to cover. Hopefully this session's been useful for you. If you go to our squareup.com/topic site, you can see the coffee break topic survey, where you can upvote topics that you think will be interesting for the coffee break and that you want to hear about, or you can suggest your own topics with the free text field at the bottom and let us know something that's been burning a hole in your thoughts or keeping you up at night. We have a microsite for the coffee break series as well. So you go to squareup.com/coffee break series, where you can sign up friends or colleagues who might find this content useful, and also see the upcoming schedule as well, so you can see what's going on and schedule time accordingly. The recordings and slides are published via our blog on squareup.com/blog. Ash has kindly agreed to include the links he found helpful when creating this MP? Because this is like sort of your first time.
This is the first time I've actually done an MP outside of SCOM. So this is using Visual Studio authoring extensions. I had seen an MP like this before, and I had tinkered with it under guidance from my mentor. However, not understanding the full MP and how it was built, I actually had to do this pretty much from scratch and sort of research how to actually pull all these bits together. So I'm going to grab those links and pop them on the blog for you. Cool. And hopefully you guys will be able to piece one of these together yourself, along with using possibly some of the sample XML that we'll be giving you.
Yep, absolutely. If you're on YouTube, just look in the description of the video and you'll see the links in there as well. But do check out our blog. It's got a whole host of cool content on there. So it's definitely worth looking at if you're in the SCOM and sort of enterprise monitoring space. And then finally, there's a YouTube playlist for this series as well, which covers all previous coffee breaks. There's hours and hours and hours of content now on case studies and cool integrations and squared up tips and tricks and best practices, covering not just squared up, but also some native stuff in SCOM and also the general sort of enterprise monitoring space. So again, definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it before. Okay, our engineering team is online as well as myself and Ash. So if you have any questions about what you've seen today or squared up or SCOM in general, please stay on the line and feel free to ask us questions. If not, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Ash.
Thank you very much for having me.
And have a great day, guys.